I just want to welcome everybody to Teach the Trainer tonight. Thank you everybody for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. Our clinical instructors and clinical preceptors are so valuable to all the programs here at Nebraska Methodist College. Tonight's program aims to give back to you and ultimately help all of us be successful in shaping the next generation of healthcare professionals. I want to take a minute to introduce those of us who put this together to help our clinical preceptors. If you are a clinical coordinator, I'll have you speak up. I'll introduce myself first. I'm Karen Bellows. I am the Assistant Program Director and Clinical Coordinator of Radiologic Technology. Shawnee, you want to introduce?
Yeah,
Perfect.
I'll go next. I'm Shawnee Allen. I am Clinical Coordinator for Surgical Technology over here at the college.
Okay. Hannah, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, I'm Hannah Weger. I am the Academic Fieldwork Coordinator in the Occupational Therapy Program. Excited to see lots of our fieldwork partners here tonight, so thank you for joining.
Wonderful. Jessica.
Yes, I'm Jessica Jackson. I am the clinical coordinator of the respiratory care program at Methodist.
Mandy.
Hi, I'm Mandy. I'm the clinical coordinator for multi-specialty sonography.
Nikki.
I am Nikki Schnitzler. I am the clinical coordinator for cardiovascular sonography.
All right. Josh, if you're on.
Yep. I'm Josh Walkenhorst. I'm the clinical coordinator for the physical therapy assistant program.
And last but not least, I will let Kendra introduce herself as well.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. We're glad you're here. My name is Kendra Craven, and I am the Dean of Health Professions.
Our speaker tonight is Caitlin Ferris. Caitlin is a strengths-based development professional and a coach passionate about helping people grow with confidence, clarity, and purpose. With a background in higher education, leadership development, and now working in a corporate employee growth and development team, she specializes in designing practical, people-centered learning experiences that translate directly into real-world impact. Her work centers on building communication, confidence, and connection, whether that's in the classroom, clinical environments, or corporate teams. Outside of work, Caitlin is a coffee-loving, kid-chasing mom and a science fiction fan who believes that development should be both meaningful and sustainable, and that progress is always important, more important than perfection. Caitlin is going to facilitate and teach us about the EASE model, a framework designed to strengthen communication and support between supervisors and learners, focusing on areas of excellence, alerts, supports, and enjoyment. Thank you, Caitlin, for joining us. I'll let you take it over.
Hi, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad to be here. When I looked at the organizations represented, everything from Nebraska Methodist College, Nebraska Medicine, Madonna Rehabilitation Hospital, CHI Health, Methodist, so many more. I really see people who are shaping the future of healthcare and education across Nebraska and beyond every single day. And that's a big deal, right? You're balancing patient care, student learning, leadership, and you're still saying yes to growing in how you supervise and develop others. So honestly, to all of you here, bravo. Today is really about building on the incredible work you're already doing and adding a few practical tools to make it even more impactful. All right, buckle up. We're ready. We're diving in. I did just realize I didn't actually time this, so I think it's going to be great. I lead with adaptability as my number 2 Clifton strength, so we are going to be just fine. All right. Clinical instruction shapes future patient care. You all know this, but I really want to pause there for a second. The way we supervise students today directly impacts how they will practice for years, maybe even decades to come. Right? You're not just teaching skills, you're shaping habits, confidence, and professional identity. And students don't just need technical skill, right? Technical skill gets them licensed, very important, but it's really confidence and reflection skills that improve patient care. So if a student can pause, think critically, and self-correct, that's when we know learning is sticking. The reality is, sometimes we default to teaching how we were taught. Many of us supervise the way we experience supervision. And sometimes that's great, and sometimes not so much, right? Without intention, we repeat patterns instead of improving them. So E is where we're spending most of our time today. This is going to give us a strategy and intentional structure. It isn't about adding more work to your plate. We all know you don't need that. It's about giving structure to what you're already doing well, helping you move from reactive instruction to hopefully intentional development. So over the next 50 minutes, let's dive in. We're going to build confident future clinicians with language, tools, and structure you can actually use tomorrow. This slide is for Hannah. I sent it to her earlier for a review, and she said, where are the objectives? So here are the objectives. As she kind of mentioned, developing strategies to learn the lens through, honestly, which we and our students lead, learn, and approach challenges. Discussing the importance of asking the right questions and developing a culture of reflection. And finally, guiding students through the discomfort of stretching beyond their comfort zones to build confidence. I recently started a new role, and right, there's a lot of growth in stretch, and I'm remembering how uncomfortable sometimes that could be, but also how necessary it is for continued development. All right, let's get some folks in the chat. More than just one, but thank you, Shawnee, for we can hear you. Think about it for a minute. I want you, just a few words, drop in the chat. Why do some students thrive in clinical rotations and others struggle, even with strong academic preparation? What do we think? Okay, people skills. What else? Fear, lacking confidence, interpersonal skills, different communication styles, lack of diverse representation. Oh, we're getting in there now. Do they want to be there? Some have previously experienced loss in a healthcare setting, previous experiences, fear, personality differences, different learning styles, Carol, new environment, confidence, imposter syndrome, so valid, so valid. Yeah, scared of messing up. Good. A lot of the friction points that you all referenced, we're going to talk about today. I think one of the big ones I thought about and also was pretty heavily represented here in the chat, right? There's a confidence gap. Sometimes the issue isn't skill, it's confidence, right? A student may technically be capable, but hesitant or unsure or overly dependent. And coaching confidence requires something different, right? Different than correcting competence. One of the things we're going to think about a lot today is, right, reflection. Sometimes students have a lack of reflection structure. We tell students to think critically or reflect, but we don't always give them a structure to actually do that. And reflection isn't always automatic. It's really a skill that needs modeling and scaffolding. Lack of resilience, right? We're seeing varying levels of resilience. Some students struggle with discomfort or corrective feedback or ambiguity. Part of the role is helping build professional endurance, not just technical ability, key as well, but building that professional endurance. And finally, a lot of you mentioned this in the chat, right? Communication. Sometimes there's a mismatch. Sometimes we and the student are simply speaking different languages, and how we give feedback, how we process information, or how we even prefer to learn. What feels clear to us may not always land clearly for them. So without shared language, frustration builds quickly. As we go through our time today, here's what I don't want to happen. I don't want this to become like a Gen Z bash. Yeah. And not that everyone that you work with supervises a Gen Z individual, but all in all, Gen Z is a generation that's bringing strengths that we deeply need in the world and in healthcare, right? Adaptability. This generation, they are adaptable. Technological fluency. Every time I have a question at work, I just turn around to like the 24-year-old who works behind me and she wheels over and does it really quick. Beautiful. They're bringing a desire for feedback. They're pretty comfortable asking questions. And they have a strong value for purpose and inclusion. So they are not less capable, they are differently formed, right? And they'll be looking to you for modeling how to handle pressure, how to navigate ambiguity, how to receive hard feedback, how to regulate emotion, and how to grow professionally in real time, right? And that's where structure, it's where it really matters. Okay, ask another question to help us center ourselves as we move into our next section. If we're talking about communication mismatch, or confidence gaps, reflection structure, we have to start with the lens we bring into the room. Now, this isn't a Clifton Strengths session, so I'm not going to go too far down the rabbit hole, but I want us to think about, what is your default lens? What do I mean by that? Understanding the lens through which people make decisions, process information, how they communicate, and even view the world is key here. So again, in the world of Clifton Strengths, we talk about the 4 domains through which people tend to lead and operate. So as I go through these, start to kind of piece together which one these you might fall under initially. So I want you to think of that first lens, the first thing that pops up where all of the information is processing. We have folks who that lens is executing, right? These are our folks, they are going to get it done. They are creating structure, they are moving tasks forward. We have folks who are really good in the influencing space, right? They're speaking up, they're advocating, they're persuading, energizing others. We have folks who are really good at relationship building, right? That's the creating connection, trust, psychological safety. And then last but certainly not least, strategic thinking. These are folks that are great at analyzing, anticipating, processing information before acting. So none are better, and all are needed. So here's the reflective question. Which lens do you naturally use first? And we are going to drop this in the chat. I'll walk through them one more time in case you're like, I don't know what she just said. So in a clinical setting, are you the one who immediately is organizing the workflow and clarifying expectation? This is what we got to get done and when we got to get it done by. If so, just type in the chat like me. These are executing folks that get things done. See if anybody pops in the chat here. Feel like a majority might be. Oh, okay, I'll keep going. Nope. Jasmine, solid. Nope. Caitlin with an exclamation mark. Got it. Okay. The next one. How many of you are the folks who are going to speak up quickly? You're going to direct the room, the flow of things, right? The speaking up, advocating, persuading. Where are my folks who are really good at the influencing? Debbie, you might be my first influencing, or you're jumping on at the end of executing. Okay. All right, starting to see some more folks there. What about my folks who are really focused on checking in with people? How is my student feeling? You're working on building rapport. You're thinking about connection, trust, and psychological safety. Anne, Aubrey, okay. Katrina. A lot of folks on this one. It's also mine, so you all are my people here. Apparently the younger generation doesn't make hearts like this. I don't know how they do it, but we're going with this today. Partially, okay. Right, and it might not be solely one or the other, but again, this is the lens I want you to start thinking about will be helpful going forward. And last, but certainly not least again, how many of you are the folks who really, you can step back to analyze information. You can think through a situation, its implications. You've got a plan that's well thought out before you act. And again, that's not always possible. But again, analyzing, anticipating, processing. Okay, there's the other half of faith. Good. Definitely, Caitlin says. All right, here's the kicker. Here's the thing. Your students may not share your dominant lens. And when we don't recognize that, we might assume resistance, when it might just be difference. So knowing your lens and learning to recognize others will undoubtedly save you time, energy, and likely frustration. It's not going to save you entirely from all of, all the frustration. It will increase clarity, understanding, and those things will lead to better productivity. Okay, so this awareness kind of becomes foundational as we move into thinking about the EASE framework. 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to serve on a panel at this event and briefly referenced this framework. It seemed to resonate with some of the participants. Based on that feedback, this year we're really dedicating intentional time to walking through the practical strategies behind the framework. So the goal isn't just to introduce EASE, it's to make it usable, right, in your settings. So EASE stands for identifying areas of excellence. So excellence is the E. Understanding alerts that signal one is nearing distress. So the A is alerts. Identifying effective supports. S, supports. And finally, calling out moments of enjoyment. It's the final E. Simple structure, but a powerful one when applied intentionally. So real quick, if you've got paper with you, or you could even think about this if you're moving and grooving while we're here tonight, I want you to think about, what is your E, your area of excellence? What do you do best? What do you do well? Also, if you want to throw it in the chat, I'll take it. But what do you do best? Your area of excellence. Because it's easy. It's easy to think about the things we don't do well. And we do have to think about those things, right? We have to create an improvement plan. We have to get better. But what do you do great? So again, the EASE framework, we're going to dive in. We're going to think about how it applies when you're working with your students. Let's jump in. One of the most important things we can help students discover in this phase of life, where do their talents naturally show up, right? Because it's talents, they become strengths, which ideally turn into areas of excellence. In over a decade of working with students, I can tell you this for sure. When students understand what they do well, where they think most clearly, where they lose track of time, right? That's moments of flow. When we lost track of time, that's a good sign. When those things are happening, they start developing professional confidence that's rooted in identity, not comparison. So why does this matter? Caitlin, why does this matter in clinical settings? One, it's going to accelerate growth. When a student knows I'm naturally strong at building rapport, or I think best when I can analyze first, they can lean into that while building those complementary skills. Growth becomes strategic instead of scattered, right? There's a focal point. 2, it reduces unnecessary self-doubt. Many students might assume they're bad at something when they're simply wired differently. A student who really leans into strategic thinking, they may look quiet, but they're likely processing really deeply. A student who leads with strong executing talents, they may move quickly because it's that clarity that energizes them. So again, understanding talent reframes difference as design. 3, it builds authentic confidence. And this is big, right? This is one of the things I think is central to a lot of you when you are working with your students is confidence. Confidence that's built on pretending, it fades, right? Confidence built on self-awareness lasts. When students can recognize, I'm at my best when, I lose track of time when, I feel energized after, they start to see patterns in how they contribute meaningfully. So, enough of me talking here for a minute. You're like, what do I do with this information, Caitlin? Here's what you can ask your student early on. And again, these slides have been posted, but if you're really kind of into one or two of them, jot them down. Ask your student, what do you think you do best right now clinically? If they know, great. And if they don't, that's telling you a lot too. When do you feel most confident in patient care? What kinds of situations help you feel steady? And when do you feel most engaged? And the big one, what feedback have you received prior about your strengths? These questions are going to really signal your strengths matter here, which is going to build their confidence. And here's what you can quietly observe alongside that. Where do they appear calm or instinctive? When do they need less prompting? What are the tasks that really seem to energize them? Where does their judgment feel steady? right? So you're helping them, you know this, you're helping them notice patterns and then affirming or refining what you see. So that process, being heard, affirmed, and stretched, builds confidence. So once we've named our talents and strengths, the next step is understanding what happens when pressure increases. Even confident students have moments where the wheels start to wobble. And we want to catch them before they fall off, right? Before we got wheels falling off all over the place. Put a little hand up. How many of you, like, you've worked with students and the wheels have fallen off? You've got there, you've seen that. Anybody? Any hands in the chat here? Scrolling through. Couple there. Someone put up all the hands. Okay, yes, lots of students, lots of wheels, right? It happens. It happens. And sometimes it's not preventable. But let's talk about it. Let's shift kind of to something equally important. Just as students have areas of strength, they also have early indicators that their stress is increasing. And you might be really aware of this, and you might be wondering, how do I catch this earlier, Caitlin? Again, this is about awareness. Every learner has patterns when pressure rises. Some might get quieter. Some might speak more quickly. Some might over-explain or become overly dependent. Some might rush decisions, and some might hesitate, right? Have we seen all of these things happen? So if we can recognize these shifts early, we can intervene, again, before performance and confidence start to decline. Now, coaching someone through it means staying present in the discomfort, helping them name what's happening, guiding them towards their next constructive step rather than stepping in for them or even avoiding the conversation. Because there might be moments where you're like, I don't even have time to deal with this right now. That's valid. It's valid. Clinical rotations are fast-paced learning environments. They're designed to stretch students. And at times that stretch will feel uncomfortable. It's important to make that explicit. And what is it? Sometimes we have to hear things 6. Oh gosh, I about said 6 or 7. I'm so sorry to do that to all of you. Sometimes we have to hear things 7 times before we actually hear them, right? Make it explicit. Stretch will feel uncomfortable. Clinical rotations are full of stretch moments. And students should understand that discomfort is a part of growth, not evidence of failure. And this is where vulnerability matters, right? There were moments in my own training where I learned lessons the hard way, right? Where feedback stung, where I misread a situation, where I had to recalibrate very quickly. And those moments were uncomfortable, but they were also formative, right? Some of your students will place you on a pedestal. You might even belong there on the pedestal. That might feel flattering, but it doesn't always serve growth. What serves growth is modeling humility and resilience, professionalism. All right, I felt like I was getting a little preachy there, so let's get into it. Here's what to ask your student early on. For some context, when you feel overwhelmed in clinic, what does that look like for you? Maybe they know, and maybe they don't. But you asking the question, they're going to start thinking about it. How do you know when stress is increasing, right? What types of situations tend to elevate pressure for you? What helps you regain steadiness? These questions normalize stress. They communicate clearly that pressure, it's expected in clinical learning, and it's something we can talk about. Put in the chat, like me, do you remember some of your first rotations? Some of the hard lessons that you learned? Yes, time management. Yes, we probably all learned that the hard way. If you can find time, be a little bit vulnerable. Share some of those stories of like, hey, I'm not on a pedestal. I have learned lessons the hard way. And here's an example, right? You don't know what you don't know. Create that space, the vulnerability, and trust. So along the way, here's what you can observe quietly. Changes in their tone or pace of speech, shifts in their body language, Increased apologizing or defensiveness. And this one's hard, right? I'm sure many of you have had students where it's like they have said sorry 12 times today. And you're like, holy smokes, I cannot hear you say sorry one more time. Or even defensiveness. Avoidance of independence, sudden over-reliance on reassurance. The goal here isn't to diagnose, you don't have time for that, but it is to recognize patterns. Because when we identify those patterns early, we prevent small stress signals from turning into performance issues, right? We protect both learning and confidence. Early awareness allows us to respond proportionally, not reactively. And that leads us to our next step. Once we recognize that a student is stretched, the question becomes, what does effective support actually look like in that moment? Support isn't lowering standards. It isn't always rescuing. It isn't always, taking over. It's being intentional about how we help them regain that steadiness while we're still moving forward. Let's talk about it. Again, support. It's not lowering the bar. Clinical expectations will remain the same. What changes, again, is how we scaffold the learning. Some students will need clearer structure before entering a patient room. And you'll either know that before or you'll learn it really quickly. Some might benefit from a brief pre-brief to organize their thinking. Some might need immediate, direct feedback. Others process better with time to reflect. The hard part is support is not a one-size-fits-all. But when support is aligned with how the learner processes and performs, again, efficiency increases. So here's what to ask your student. When you feel unsure, what kind of support is most helpful? And that's a good one to start, like first week, because there's going to be a lot of moments that they feel unsure. How can you best support them? Do you prefer to talk through a plan before entering the room or debrief afterward? Because you might have a preference and you might feel that the way you operate is the way indeed. Give it a chance. Give it a chance. Ask them, is it more helpful to receive feedback in the moment or after you've had time to reflect? Right? I have worked with students who want real-time, in the moment, one-on-one, face-to-face feedback. And then I have worked with students that they want and honestly need a little time to think and process before we have a conversation. Now, in the world of education, things are not ever life or death, so I feel like it is different in that way. But ask them, like, is it more helpful to receive feedback in the moment or after? And if you have the ability to do one or the other, do. So again, these questions are creating shared expectations. They're also reinforcing that accountability and support can coexist. I am just curious, again, in the chat, I know I'm making you all do a lot of work. Otherwise, I would maybe be here like, gosh, thinking about coffee. What types of support, in your experience, what types of support have you found to be effective when working with students? Like, give me the gold nuggets, like, I've done this and it's been great, or I had never thought about this until, and now I use it all the time. Like, what have you found to be effective in supporting students? Yeah, a lot of those defensive students just needed feedback at a different time, right? Maybe after they debriefed, wrote it down. Good. What else? Kindness. Respect. Sometimes just listening. Vanessa says, I'd like to ask them what they thought went well and what they would do differently, right? And encourage reflection before I even give them feedback. And also as I'm thinking about good things, not just what the negative, right? What went wrong? Having each person complete quick tools to learn their learning styles and feedback styles. Beautiful. Oh, I love that, Leah. And reading about each other's. Yes. Yep. Helping them know they're not alone. Plan development before implementation. Wait for them to ask for help before I jump in. Yes. Reminding them what they know to build confidence, right? Confidence is key. We've talked about that a lot. Good. Self-reflection. All right. Now you might be sitting here thinking, listening, like, Caitlin, this sounds like catering to every preference, and I surely don't have time for that. That's fair. That is fair. But this isn't about customizing every interaction or even lowering your standards. It's about front loading that clarity, right? When you can spend a few minutes early on understanding how a student processes feedback, how they handle stress or prefer structure, you're reducing repetition later. You're reducing miscommunications. You reduce reteaching. You reduce avoidable frustration. And all of that does save time. The part of being an effective clinical instructor, you know this, is not just knowing the curriculum. Coming from education, I love curriculum. But it's knowing how to deliver it in a way that the learner can actually absorb. That's not catering, it's teaching. When expectations are clear and support is aligned, you'll see fewer corrections, steadier independence, and stronger performance over time. And that is a worthwhile investment. So we've talked about strengths, we've talked about stress signals, and we've talked about support. Let's end on something lighter, but still important. The last E, dun, 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 right? Enjoyment. Because students are not just developing clinicians, they're also whole people. And you have probably seen this, right? They are whole people, a lot happening. Clinical rotations can be intense. They're stretching, they're fast, they're evaluative. But students still need moments where they feel energized, right? Not just competent. And sometimes that shows up in surprising ways. Some students love patient education conversations. Some might love solving complex clinical puzzles. Some will love building rapport. Some will love the rhythm of a busy day. And I'm imagining that some of those are probably your favorites, right? They just love to get in, the day is stacked full, go, go, go. And some, by golly, genuinely enjoy documentation and structure. Is there anyone here, raise your hand, who enjoys documentation and structure? There's gotta be somebody in here. Where's my documentation and structure, folks? Typically partner with people who do. It's like, I'm not raising my hand. Everyone will come for me. Just like, no, structure, yes. Documentation, not so much. Yeah. Oh, that's fair. That's fair. Outside of clinic, your students, they have interests. They have hobbies, families, stressors, same as all of us, right? Those things matter. Enjoyment fuels resilience. When students have areas in or outside of work where they feel energized, they're going to recover faster, right? They'll tolerate stress better. They'll show up steadier. It isn't about entertainment, it's about sustainability. So here's what to ask your student. Within the clinic, what parts do you genuinely enjoy? This is a question for everyone. What makes a good day feel good? Like, how do you know you've had a good day, and what happened? What does it look like? Because sometimes you got quite a few bad days in a row, and you really got to lean on those good days, right? What do you look forward to during the week? Outside of clinic, what helps you recharge? Outside of clinic, what helps you recharge? And this is as simple as, Hannah already told you I love science fiction. Maybe you have a student who loves science fiction. You saw a trailer for a movie and you're like, hey, I know you love science fiction. Have you thought about going to this movie? Right? Just those small moments to build connection, to show like, hey, I've been paying attention. Those are key. Those are key. And again, these questions, they're signaling something important, right? That you're seeing them as a whole person, not just performance. All right, I got 20 minutes. I better get with it. I better get with it here. So EASE gives us a structure for noticing what's happening in a learner's development. Reflection is what helps students internalize those observations. So the importance of reflection. Experience alone doesn't automatically build judgment, right? Reflection is what helps students connect their action to reasoning. So without it, learning might stay surface level. With it, clinical reasoning develops. The 4 things that really matter. Time. When reflection happens matter. There isn't one ideal moment. Sorry, this is not like the secret sauce I'm giving you, but there is not one ideal moment. Brief, in the moment reflection can clarify thinking. End of day reflection might add perspective. Mid-rotation conversations recalibrate direction. I had a staff member, if we were face to face, would struggle to communicate, to respond. We started doing walk and talks, whole different ballgame. And in that instance, there was a cultural difference, like the face to face, but when we started walking and talking, sometimes you just have to figure out what is the best time and place to have conversations. So again, the key is intention. So if reflection is never prompted, it's often postponed. Like talking to your teen in the car. I don't have teens yet, but I'm picturing it now. So time, place. Psychological safety matters. Students reflect more honestly when they feel safe. And that's true for all of us. Sometimes that's a structured debrief. Sometimes it's a quiet side conversation. Sometimes it's written before spoken. The setting will influence the depth. Once you find psychological safety, you've really reached the gateway to real growth. The structure matters. Reflect on that. It's pretty vague. Hey, reflect on that. Specific prompts, right? What went well? What would you adjust? What surprised you? What assumptions were you operating from? What might you do differently next time? Did you feel the difference, right? Those are inviting. And some of you are probably great at this already. Those are inviting questions instead of, hey, you did this pretty good, but then I noticed this and this. Next time I would do this and this. Sometimes in the moment, that's what it has to be. But you will always get a better response with the open-ended questions. What will you do differently next time? How can I better help you? Right? So structure keeps that reflection productive rather than emotional. And finally, consistency over intensity. Reflection doesn't need to be lengthy. Short, regular moments are more impactful than one comprehensive debrief at the end of a rotation, right? So consistency is going to build the reasoning. Now you might be thinking, Caitlin, I only have 1 week with my students. How can I possibly create psychological safety? Well, I'm sure someone had this question, right? So if you only had 1 week, I would consider doing these 4 things. Set your expectations immediately. Here's how I get feedback. How do you prefer to receive it, right? Get some clarity there. Here's what I want you to ask me. Number 2, ask one powerful question early. What helps you feel supported? We've already hit on that one. What's one thing that makes learning stressful for you? That question alone, I promise you, will build that safety. Separate performance from identity, right? Instead of, you're not ready, say, this skill needs more reps. Let's work on it. Students feel safer when critique is about behavior, not about who they are. Again, that's true across the board for all humans. And 4, if you can, close each day with a 3-minute debrief. What went well? What felt challenging? What's the focus for tomorrow? 3 questions. 3 questions, 3 minutes. Some instructors have found it really helpful to encourage a simple reflection journal. It's not formal, it's not graded, it's just a place to write. Observations, questions, patterns, areas of uncertainty. Writing can often clarify thinking in a way that for some conversation alone doesn't, right? And that's probably true for us. Sometimes we like to write down our thoughts. So to bring it all together, the ease helps us frame development. Reflection helps students internalize it. I love this one. Productive discomfort as the growth catalyst. Growth in clinical settings is rarely comfortable. Stretch experiences are built into rotations. But not all discomfort produces growth because there's a difference, right? There's a difference between overwhelm and stretch. Productive discomfort happens when challenge is paired with support. When students are pushed slightly beyond what feels easy, but not beyond what feels safe. Avoiding discomfort prevents growth, but overexposing students to stress erodes confidence. Oh, it's such a fine line. It's tricky. It's hard. It is not easy. You all are doing hard work, truly. Our role is to really calibrate that middle space. So discomfort is not the goal, development is. Discomfort is simply, though, the mechanism. So how do you coach through discomfort? It requires presence. It means not rescuing too quickly, not escalating too harshly, staying steady, really. It involves normalizing, like, this is a part of development. We've already hit on this, but asking reflective questions instead of giving immediate answers. Holding standards without personalizing mistakes. And sometimes the most important coaching move is silence. Giving a student space to think. 7 seconds of silence, try it. It feels like a long time, but sometimes silence is the move. Again, our goal is not to eliminate discomfort. That's not going to be helpful. But it is to help students build capacity within that space. Couple more slides here. We are close. We are so close. Feedback. Dun, dun, dun. Feedback. The delivery matters just as much as the content. It's so true. It's so true. The delivery matters just as much as what you're saying. Because if you don't deliver it well, they will not hear it. And then you did waste time. Then you wasted time. Students hopefully understand they're here to learn, right? They're expecting feedback. Again, this generation is pretty good about asking questions and wanting that feedback. Do we sometimes have to craft it differently than what we are naturally used to? Yes. Yes. It's how that feedback is delivered that will significantly shape how it's received. So the same message delivered in 2 different ways can either build confidence or shut it down. Same thing as what we're going to talk about next with recognition. Feedback is not a one-size-fits-all. And assuming that how we prefer to receive feedback is how our students prefer to receive it is often where misalignment begins. So again, how you prefer to receive feedback is not necessarily how your student prefers it. That awareness alone can shift the tone of a rotation. Ask your student directly. Do you prefer feedback in the moment? Do you want time to process first? If we can grant time, do you want time to process first? Are you someone who wants maybe some bullet points to help you prepare for a discussion? Is it more helpful to talk it through immediately or reflect before we debrief? Right? This is going to increase usability. The feedback timing, again, in the moment, end of a session, scheduled weekly review, whatever you and your student find to be most helpful. The format, this could be verbal, written, can even be reflection questions and then discussion. And you don't have to offer every option every time. But when expectations around feedback are clear, defensiveness decreases and clarity increases. So again, it's that structure that will reduce the emotional friction. All right, recognition. Let's kind of land on somewhere that feels good. Reinforcing what's working. Talking points, here we go. We spend a lot of time talking about corrective feedback, but recognition deserves equal attention. And it's not just praise for the sake of praise. Nobody likes that. It feels gross. No. It's reinforcing what we want our students to continue doing. Because again, when students know what they do well, specifically, they will repeat it. That's true for all of us. General comments like, good job, that ain't going to do it. That's not going to build confidence, right? Specific recognition does. Hey, you maintained eye contact and slowed your explanation when you sensed that the person wasn't quite understanding. That really helped your patient get on board with what you were talking about. Specific recognition builds their identity. It tells the student, this is part of your developing competence. Recognition also stabilizes confidence during stretch periods. When students are regularly stretched, they need evidence that progress is happening. Recognition is that evidence. So ask yourself, as the instructor, what is the student doing better than last week? Where have I seen growth? And have I named it clearly? And for those of us who, if we know our Clifton strengths, those of us who have high significance, we understand the depth, the value, and the importance of recognition. But for those of us who don't have that as high of top of mind, sometimes this takes a reminder. If it's a sticky note on your desk, like provide recognition, meaningful recognition, specific, timely recognition. Exactly, Vanessa. It is like parenting. And sometimes we probably do feel like parents when we are working with the students. You got to point out the good stuff. So they aren't just hearing, don't do this or no all the time. I want everyone to take a minute. I want you to think about the best recognition you have received in your place of work. Maybe for some of us, it is a handwritten note. Amy, thanks for taking the leap there. A compliment from a coworker not in my department. Yeah, meaningful. A peer noticed my work, nominated me for a peer recognition award. Yeah, Chris, it does mean a lot. Ah, indeed. Notes from patients. Those are the best. Being told I was good at explaining things clearly. When our family members recognize our value. That does feel good. That does feel good. Notes. I had a colleague in my last job, her entire wall was all of the notes she had received from colleagues and students and their parents. And I'm talking like the whole wall. I was like, man, facilities is not going to like when you take all that down. They're going to have to repaint this whole thing. Do you keep a feel-good folder? At my last job, I had a feel-good folder. Like when someone would send me an email that was really meaningful, I'd put it in a feel-good folder. And then maybe on those not so great days, I'd pop it back open. I loved my last job. I didn't really have too many not great days, but what is it about recognition that feels most meaningful to you? And here's what I'll say. As good as it feels to receive recognition, it feels just as good to give it. So it is free and it is easy. Don't withhold it. Don't withhold it. All right. From framework to real life. Frameworks are helpful. Yes, that was great. Frameworks are helpful. But what matters is really what happens tomorrow morning, right? When you walk into the clinic, when a student hesitates, when time is short, patience is even shorter. You don't need to implement everything at once. Start small. Ask one better question. Add one structured reflection moment. Clarify one expectation. Over time, these small shifts change the tone of your rotation. And that changes how students will enter the profession. Because again, we started with it, let's end with it. Clinical instruction shapes future patient care. And that's the work. That's the work that matters. So I will say I have talked at you for 55 minutes and you all have been doing so great participating in the chat. But I want to thank you, right, for the work that you do to invest in others. It has a ripple effect far beyond what you will ever see. If anything today sparked a thought or idea, I'd love to continue the conversation. Here's all of my info, all of my contact. I am excited for us to transition to the panel portion. You're probably tired of hearing me talk.
Thank you, Hannah. We have two panelists on tonight. We have Bree and Corey. I'm gonna let them introduce themselves. So Corey, you can go ahead and start.
Yeah, hi guys. My name is Corey Kundle. I am a professor over at UNMC in the occupational therapy department, and I've got a long-standing history with the OT programs around here as a site coordinator, and that's why I'm on tonight as part of this panel. So people like Hannah and I worked together for years and years to place students and set them up with rotations.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bree, can you introduce yourself?
Maybe. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, my computer keeps going kind of in and out. So, hi, I'm Bree McCamey. I work at Methodist Hospital. I've worked there since 2016. I've kind of worked my way up the ladder while I've been there. I started in sterile processing and OR supply as an OR aide. Then I went back to school as a surgical tech and went through the first, second stages of that. And then I went back and got my first assist, and now I am the robotic surgery coordinator at Methodist. I also precept all the students that come in the surgical tech programs from Methodist, from Iowa Western, and from Southeast Community College.
Awesome. All right. So we have some panel questions for you guys. So we'll just jump right in if you guys are okay with that. Okay. Can you share an example of a time when, based on a strategy you have used, the student's confidence improved? Corey, you want to start?
Yeah, definitely. I've been thinking about this one. I might have had an unfair advantage in seeing a few of these questions prior to right this second, but I think a strategy that's always worked well has been come up with a few expectations of a student that maybe isn't clinical in nature right away. Like, hey, I want you to walk around here with a sense of urgency. Hey, I want you to ask me questions. Hey, I want you to be 5 minutes early to everything we do. Some of those non-clinical skills that they can go have control over and get them a couple early wins right away is really helpful to boost that confidence that they're doing the things you've asked.
That's great. Bree, how about you?
I've worked with several students, and you know, a lot of them learn technical ability really quick, but building confidence is always kind of a struggle in the sterile field when you have people that are pretty confident in what they're doing around you. So noticing that they're more focused on not making mistakes during the flow of the case, kind of reviewing the procedure and anticipating the instruments with them ahead of time and kind of talking through them with what to expect. During the case, I would limit interruptions to safety-related issues and save most of my feedback for afterwards, unless it was something that needed to be addressed in the moment. Also, making sure to acknowledge what they're doing well. Over time, they became more confident and engaged.
Awesome. We have a question from the chat. Amy was asking, if a student is struggling, at what point would you recommend getting their clinical instructor involved? I feel this can be a crusher, but I feel it may be more beneficial earlier rather than later. Bree, you want to grab this one first?
Yes. So in the past, I've had a student that had this kind of similar thing where there was just some little things that we needed to work on. So for this particular student, it took more of a one-on-one kind of approach, where instead of having different preceptors, different cases, you had one preceptor. That way you would get comfortable and you would have some more one-on-one time. Obviously, then the clinical instructor and I were in talks to make sure that everything was being covered.
Thank you. Corey?
Yeah, when an issue is identified, if it's something that's not like a really severe, significant safety or ethical concern, when maybe it's just about like a clinical skill, I think coming up with an internal plan first, give it another week if you can afford the week. On our end of things, when we have clinical students in occupational therapy, it's 12-week rotation, so we've got some time. I recognize that not everyone does, but if you can come up with a plan internally, and then if that doesn't work, pulling in the instructors that seems to be a nice way. That way you can say, hey, we've tried this. We're not just problem finders. We've tried to put in a solution. It didn't work. We could use a hand. I think too, every program I've gotten to work with, they provide resources, information on how to handle things, ideas, touch points, conversations behind the scenes, utilizing all those resources. They're there for a reason, and they're typically pretty helpful.
Thank you, guys. Our next question is, how do you identify and highlight a student's strengths in the clinical setting, especially when they are still building confidence or making mistakes? Corey, you want to start this one off?
Yeah, definitely. Relationship building right up front and figuring out, we said in the chat earlier throughout that first hour, learning styles, ways they want feedback, things like that, but also what have they done throughout their school career so far? What have they really liked? What do they think they're good at? Knowing what they're confident in already going into your rotation with them is a nice thing to then you can capitalize on those things again to build that confidence from the ground. And I always look at it as like low-hanging fruit, like, hey, if you are really good at talking with patients, let's go just talk with some patients to start with. Or hey, if you're really good at documentation, let's write a note from the first session you've seen. Just write one in a Word document for fun and let me see it. Again, just capitalizing on those pre-existing strengths before you even start to identify what's maybe not come as far along.
Thank you. Bree, how about you?
I think to piggyback kind of off of that is setting goals early. A lot of the surgical tech students that we have come in at different points in their educational experience. So making sure that everybody is on the same page helps to highlight what strengths you're going through. So, you know, if you're brand new, you're going to have different strengths that you're going to acquire versus somebody who's been in clinicals and is towards the end of their rotation. So making it a point to just identify things that they're doing correctly and that mistakes are part of learning and that their strengths still have value in the OR, which is critical for building all of their confidence. Basically just, you know, you have a table to set up. If you've set this table up before, you know, just kind of get them feeling good about what they're doing. Helps to keep them building confidence and knowing that mistakes are okay.
I like that. So that brings us into the next one. So for you personally, as a clinician, what is something that builds your confidence? And how do you share this technique with your students you have supervised? Corey?
Yeah, I think we alluded to it a little bit in the first hour that getting a compliment of some sort, whether that be a note or an email or just someone recognizing something small you did, that's usually what's always sent me through the roof. And I imagine that a student with me is going to feel the same way. So I'll be sure to orchestrate if a fellow therapist or someone else on the team says, hey, I really love the way your student Corey Jr. Did that thing over there. I'll say, can you email them that? Would you mind telling them that instead of telling me? That'd be awesome for them to hear it. I think a lot of us probably recognize that we need to facilitate that, but then take it one tiny step further, that if your student recognizes something else neat that someone else has done, treat them that same way and say, hey, go tell them. They're going to love hearing that. Someone said it earlier that like, I love being able to tell someone, hey, I recognize that was awesome what you just did. And so teaching that to your student, that's this perfect little like pay it forward circle that we can live in professionally is I think it's a good gesture and a good professional skill to put in their pockets going forward.
Thank you. How about you, Bree?
For me, it's preparation that builds my confidence. Knowing the procedure, knowing the doctor, knowing the instrument, knowing the setups helps me to function calmly. Each surgery I try to break down into little steps. So, you know, you get this part ready for the next 2 steps and you get this part ready for the next 2 steps after. The goal is to always be 2 steps ahead of the doctor during the surgeries. So if you can break things down piece by piece as you know, as you're watching, you can say, okay, now that we've gotten to this point, now you move to this point. Also making sure going through preference cards, going through case cards, getting people familiar with the instruments and the supplies that they're going to handle, also will help make them feel confident because they feel like they've been set up for success.
Very nice. It leads into the next one. Do you have a specific strategy or tool that you use as a supervisor to identify some of the students' areas for excellence or strengths? Corey?
I think it's a pretty simple one. I've always just utilized the heck out of reflection. But a good true, like Friday at 4, sit down in a quiet space, like kick our feet up on the desk and think back to the last week of what did you really enjoy and what did you do well? I've taken notes, you've taken notes. But being really intentional to not do that in like that passive setting where we're running in between rooms or hallways or buildings or anything like that, like truly blocking the schedule, even if it means that extra half hour at the end of the day, to hindsight it really, really well. That way you know how to support for success in that next week. And like most of us probably realize that like weekly goal setting is so important, and what better time to do it when it's fresh in your head, and then you can start the week off on the right foot, going forward really quickly.
Thank you. How about you, Bree?
In the moment is also is a very good way to make sure they understand what they're excelling at or strengths are. Usually at the end of the week, I think it is kind of nice to just sit and reflect about things they can work on, things that they're doing well. That way they can go into the new week feeling good. Looking at patterns at things, you know, if you have multiple cases in a day, you can kind of pick up on patterns on things that they could be struggling with or that they're succeeding at. And you can kind of nitpick on those things and be like, hey, I know you're doing this, but you could be, let's maybe try doing this next week. Or so-and-so showed me how to do it this way. Well, next week you're going to be with so-and-so and they do it this way. So maybe just having them prepared for maybe a shift also in the flexibility keeps it open-minded.
Our next question kind of has like, it says, I have always utilized the instructor method of trial and error or learn through doing, as repetition often leads to greater assurance. Like one of you was saying a little bit ago, what strategies would you recommend when this method isn't effective or the student begins to freeze or doubt themselves? Bree, you can grab this one first if you want.
Learning through trial and error is kind of what surgery is about. You know, you kind of get not thrown to the wolves, but kind of thrown to the wolves. I mean, it's a very active learning. When you can tell that a student is freezing and they're overwhelmed, you kind of shift your approach to breaking things down into smaller tasks and identifying what part is making them nervous, what part is making them freeze. You can ask them, you know, what you can do in order to help them feel more comfortable. Sometimes for students at the beginning of a surgical case, the draping and throwing off all the cords is a lot to handle all at the same time because you're also handing stuff to the surgeon and you're running and getting stuff from your back table and you're moving. There's lots of moving parts to it. So sometimes students get overwhelmed with that. So breaking things down one by one, making sure that they know that these are the steps and this is the order it goes. And being able to help and support them as they're working through it.
Very nice. How about you, Corey?
My clinical background is 95% brain injury rehab. That's what I did for years and years before jumping onto the academic side. And so I think I have a predisposition for that procedural learning or that errorless learning. And so if I have a student who I feel is freezing or missing or just struggling to process through, I think I put that hat on a little bit with them and I will coach them step by step and I will pre-beat them to the next step. And I will support them for success and maybe nudge them from the back across that finish line for that moment or that interaction or that session or intervention or whatever it might be. For the sake of them still getting that physical rep, it probably isn't the best mental rep because they get to go on autopilot and just do what they're told. But when we talk about like surviving moments and building confidence, sometimes doing what we have to do to get them there, to prove to them that they can get there, they can physically get through that moment or get through that transfer, whatever it is. And so, yeah, I probably put my therapist hat on a little bit during those interactions.
Caitlin, I was wondering if you could use the ease model and connect any of this. Do you have any insights that you could give us when working with students when they freeze or doubt themselves?
To be honest, I feel like we've got some experts on the panel, so leaning in really to kind of their advice or suggestions. I would be curious in the chat what other people have found to be most helpful. I think learning happens right when we are gathering a lot of different ideas and insights and suggestions. I think if you've done the work up front, right, if you've built the relationship, if you've talked with a student about how do they learn best, what kind of feedback do they prefer, what does it look like when they are nearing, stress or de-stress, you'll have a better inclination in that moment of what to do. And sometimes, like, life just happens. You got to jump in the moment, do what needs to be done, but processing later. Again, I would really probably lean into, do you know what are those signs that they're nearing distress or stress, and how they want to how they prefer to receive feedback? You know those two things, you're probably already a step ahead. But a lot of times it's probably just leaning on you all as clinicians, as your experience in those moments. What have you found to be most helpful in working with the multitude of students you have? Yeah, and there is that humanity, like that vulnerability of, I still learn lessons the hard way, right? Like, things are constantly evolving and changing. There's new systems, new process, new information. Like, I do not know all things. Like, be human alongside them, but have a hard conversation. If you got to have a hard conversation, you got to have a hard conversation. But be vulnerable, be honest with them. I like that, Chris.
Thank you, guys. I agree. Chris put in the chat, I think it helps to remind the students that we are all learning. Give them feedback about previous success that they have had. I love that. Okay, so our next question, I really like this question because I feel like a lot of my students have been dealing with this lately. How do you help students overcome imposter syndrome as a new healthcare provider? Bree, you want to take this one?
Yeah. Did you say Corey or Bree? I'm so sorry.
Oh, either one.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I think I'm looking at the chat over here too. I think Chris just said it, the exact answer to this. Like, we're all in it together. We all still have imposter syndrome every day. Caitlin, me, you, and Bree right now, we're all probably flirting with a little imposter syndrome being speakers in this evening. And so letting them know that. There's a Richard Jenkins, he's an actor, if you could pick up that name. There's a movie he's in, I don't remember. It's like his daughter is talking to him and says, like, Dad, I just can't wait for the day where I feel like I'm finally the adult. And he's like, honey, newsflash, that'll never happen. You will never feel like you're finally there. I've pulled that scene up and had students watch it for the 15 seconds because it's real. You're never going to feel like you're finally in charge or the boss or completely and totally autonomous. And that's the reality check. And once they realize you're in it with them, misery loves company, right? In that sense. So.
How about you, Bree?
Yeah, just normalizing it and just let it known that, feelings of uncertainty is common, especially early in practice and as you carry on in your professional and actual regular life. Also reflecting on their progress and recognizing their milestones also, I think, will help them kind of bring themselves back. Also reminding them that confidence looks different for everyone, that being thoughtful or cautious doesn't always mean that they're not capable.
I'll hop in quick. Kind of similar to what Hannah said. I do love humor. Someday later in life, I'm going to be a comedian. I just know it. There'll probably be 4 people in me there, but there'll still be a goal achieved. I think it was maybe it was a Harvard professor, talked about like your power pose, like your power pose. What does it look like? And so initially I'll ask, students I'm working with, like when they're kind of down on themselves, when I can sense this, I'm like, where's your power pose? Show me your power pose, right? Like, is it shoulders back, like chest out? And then in those hard moments, I'll be like, girl, where's the power pose? Show me it. Like something that you can kind of just like snap them back into the moment. Like, hey, it's okay. You've got this. Like you're here for a reason. I'm here with you for a reason. So I do like a little of those like inside jokes if you can build the relationship. And I love a good power pose. When we're not feeling confident, power pose.
I like that. We could all use that. Our next question. How do you assess a student's readiness and competency before allowing them to perform procedures independently? Bree?
For us, it's a lot of monitoring their sterile technique, knowing their instrument knowledge, and their thought process of procedures. I like to let the student do as much as they feel comfortable with doing. This allows them kind of some freedom to learn on their own, as well as know that they have somebody to help them. So having them count on their own, having them hand as well as they can. Also during the procedure, asking them like, what kind of things do you see? What kind of things, what organs are you looking for in this area? If you're down in the pelvis, you should be looking for the ureters for a lot of cases, and just kind of recognizing and having them start to understand and pay attention to what's happening around them, that they can kind of relay that back and take that in. Kind of gives me more confidence to let them do things more individually.
Thank you. How about you, Corey?
Yeah, I'd like to say that I have a like very black and white procedural checkoff before I let a student do something independently, but I'll be blatantly honest, and I might say this and it might be a little contradicting, but a lot of the times I probably don't. I probably allow them to take that step outside their comfort zone without knowing 110% that what they're about to do is going to be 110% perfect, but being able to read and react and be a little bit reflexive with them. I mean, lucky us, we're therapists, we're OTs, and so the things that we're doing with people 99% of the time are not life-threatening, and I recognize that not everyone has that luxury. But I think the competency comes with trust and confidence and the inkling that like, yeah, I think they're gonna do okay enough and probably figure out the rest of what they don't know right in the middle of that interaction or that experience. And so again, that metaphor of standing behind them and just nudging, get ready to catch if they fall, figuratively and literally in some therapy settings, right? But yeah, I think I'm admitting to you guys that sometimes I don't have like, I don't know for 110% certain that they're going to nail what they're about to go try.
Put a question in the chat because I genuinely am curious from your all's perspective. Right, experiential learning. What happens when along the way students realize like, maybe this isn't for me, maybe this isn't the best fit, or this experience, like what? I am curious. What do you do? How do you coach them? What happens?
Bree, you want it?
Sure. So a lot of times surgery is not for everybody, as is every career is not for everybody. There's kind of a niche for everybody. You just kind of, you guide them through as well as they can. I mean, they get to the point where they're like, hey, I really know this isn't what I'm doing. Then, that's a talk that you have to have with their instructor and make sure that they're, on the same page with that instructor and they can go from there. But trying to bring them back and being like, well, what part of it, do you not like? Is there anything I can do to help with that? Like, is it because you're not comfortable? Just kind of being there for them as kind of a support system to be like, if you can, not really talk them into it, but, make sure that this is truly something that isn't maybe good for them versus something that they're just frustrated with right now.
It's a tough one. and I think I know we have some academic fieldwork coordinators in the teams room, so they probably have opinions on like, boy, it's hard to uproot that schedule. It's hard to find new placements at the drop of a hat. Like there are timetables we have to keep people on track for graduation. There's so many of those factors that go into it. If I'm going to wear my therapist hat for a second versus my educator hat, as OTs, we get 2 big opportunities to go do these clinical experiences, and to be miserable in one sounds and feels awful, and like they're missing out on a golden opportunity professionally. And so I think if I'm the therapist on that end and this is my student and they're just not loving my setting, I say, let's advocate, let's call your academic fieldwork coordinator and figure out what's next for you. How can we make this the right thing? But I can empathize with on the logistical organizational side, that's a tough thing.
I like that. I also like that they would like to hear from the academic fieldwork coordinators. So do any of our clinical coordinators have any insight on this? Aubrey said, I think asking them why they wanted to go into that field in the first place, try to bring it back to their passion in starting this career, would be helpful for them to reflect on it if it's a hard day or truly not what they want. I like that. Hannah said, consider floating the student to a teammate or asking yourself what piece of what I am doing that the student isn't loving is truly entry-level experience. Are there opportunities to shift their workload, or is it simply they have to get through it, resilience type thing? So there's some things to consider. I like that.
As a student, I know that there were some clinical sites that I really did not like. And not that it deterred me from wanting to carry on, but could definitely see how some people may not have good experiences at different places. So sometimes just finding a place that they fit in better and they feel more comfortable and are more welcome makes a huge difference as well.
I agree with that. Sometimes clinical sites are just not a good fit, and recognizing that is a big piece of that. All right, I got a couple more questions for you guys. The next one is, how do you balance patient care responsibilities with teaching moments when supervising students in clinical? Corey, how about you?
Accept the fact that it's going to take a little bit more time. I think if you truly enjoy it, it's of value to us to, like I mentioned earlier, like take that extra half hour on a Friday afternoon, right? That's outside of our productive time. If we're hourly employees, we might even be clocking out to have that last end of week conversation, which again, goes back to one of those things like, why do we do it? How do we build our confidence? Well, man, I want to provide this student with a great experience, because at the end, I want them to tell me, wow, I loved that. Thank you. That was great. I'm so ready to go be a therapist. And those 12 extra half hours I spent investing a little extra time in them becomes well worth it. So that doesn't have to offset my quote unquote productivity. I think in one of my last roles before jumping over into academia, it was advocating with managers of like, hey, what a little bit of time investment might mean in a student. If they love it here, we've got a shortage of employees. We've got staffing shortages. If they love it here, they're going to want to apply for this job the second they graduate. We're already going to know them. They're going to have a good time. We're going to be able to give them good recommendations. You'll hire them quicker. And even going as far as like, if they want to come here bad enough and the manager is looking at our budget, like, you might get them a little cheaper. And I know that's a weird thing to say, but that's the reality that some of these people are thinking about, and helping guide that thinking might help them be open to freeing you up a little bit more time to invest in mentorship throughout your weeks with them. Business hat for half a second, right?
Bree, how about you? Did you?
Patient safety is obviously one of the #1 priorities in the OR. So teaching kind of comes in brief and intentional moments. Things happen before cases, during low stress points, or post case debriefs. In a moment that you would have to step into a case You would explain the reasoning afterwards so that the student understands the decision and they're not frustrated in the moment. I can tell you as somebody who's had to have a case taken over for them, because it happens to everybody, is that it doesn't feel good. And, then you feel really frustrated and down on yourself. So just kind of hearing in the moment, being like, no, you're not doing anything wrong. It's fine. It's fine. Doesn't really help. So just being like, hey, I'm going to step in for just a minute here. And then be like, I'll explain after we're done what's happening. And sometimes it's a high pressure thing that happens during the case. Sometimes the doctor is just nitpicky. So it can be for lots of different reasons that could not be anything having to do with the student at all. But just making sure that clarifying to them and being honest and upfront with them is the most important thing through that, and just making sure that they're understanding.
Shawnee, I'm going to give you just a little bit of a break here.
Yeah.
I love that Caitlin's question in there, and I'm going to really lean on our clinical coordinators and fieldwork coordinators too to answer this. But she said, what's one piece of advice or feedback you received that changed how you practice? And this can be from anyone. I think that's really big as we think about students, and working with students. But if you can think back to what that was that you heard from somebody that really changed that. So thank you for that question. Clinical coordinators or anyone, I'd love to hear from anyone.
I'll take this one first. I had a student come back several years later thanking me for the things that they learned, specifically like collimation and radiation protection. It made them a better practitioner. So I just kept doing what I was doing, knowing that it was making a difference to not only our patients, but our students as well.
Love it. Anyone else?
Yeah, for me, something as a student that I was told was, you're going to have good and bad days, and all the days end the same. You did the best you could that day, whether it was your opinion the best you could do, but it was the best you could do that day. And that there's a learning experience out of everything, good and bad.
This is Chris from Respiratory Care. A long time ago, my first job, my first supervisor gave me feedback that all I needed was more confidence. And that made all the difference in getting hard procedures like drawing my first arterial blood gas, or just believing that I could do it. And just having somebody else believe in you, I think, was the key that helped me move forward and inspire students too. That one person can make such a difference.
Awesome.
Chris, can I add another thing onto what you said?
Sure.
Giving students freedom. I remember the first x-ray I ever took on my own where someone did not step in and help me. That was like life-changing. So don't step in when you don't need to be. It might be the thing that gives them the wings to fly.
I'm Josh. I'm with the PTA clinical coordinator. One thing that I remember from my own experiences and, being in that student experience is sometimes it really doesn't matter what you say. It's just more echoing that you're there to listen, and you never know, obviously, what outside stressors they are going through as well. There can always be family issues or things that you may not see or understand in the background. And so, that they may not have a support group. And so, at sometimes if they're at their lowest or most stressed, you might be the only one there. And it can be very easy to just say, well, I'm too busy. Like I got this and this, we'll talk later. But just being present can sometimes just make them feel a little bit more at ease and confident with what they need to do.
I love that. And I love how Caitlin, you said, give me the good stuff. This is the good stuff. One other thing I'm just going to, talk to about our clinical coordinator and fieldwork coordinators that they're so good about is kind of what Josh just mentioned. Sometimes there is other things going on, and, maybe you guys don't know yet, but please feel free. And yes, we've got FERPA and we've got HIPAA and we've got all of those things, but our clinical coordinators and fieldwork coordinators are here to help you out. So if you're recognizing that something might just not be, right yet, but you can't quite get to it, you're not really sure, reach out to them, because, these guys have all had these students for sometimes a year. I mean, we all go out of clinical at different times, right? Every program is a little bit different, but they do have a pretty good relationship with those students. So if you need help with that area of maybe how to reach a student, and same for us is, we also struggle, and I'm speaking for them, but these are some of the common problems where maybe they struggled reaching them in the classroom with skills, but now they've gotten to you for clinical or field work and they're doing amazing things. So the partnership with some of these things is so important. And that's why we appreciate, all of you to be able to do some of these things. Lots of great things popping up in the chat. So Caitlin, thanks for that question. I loved it. So sorry, I just had to interact because I love that question. So I'm going to turn it back to Shawnee, and I might be quiet for a little bit, but that was a long time for me to not say anything.
You are fine. I did see someone put in the chat, also not to take things personally when tension rise or someone is upset. And that really resonates with me. I remember when I was new and one of my first preceptors, she told me, it's okay to make a mistake. No one's going to be mad at you. And that really, they're not going to be mad at you. It was a big, big thing for me. I do have someone, they said, can you give some advice on how to handle a situation when a student is not doing well and may not pass the experience? When do you want to grab that one?
I would say you have to start off by kind of isolating and figuring out what the problem is, what they're doing wrong, and then try to work together to identify it. We had a surgical tech who just would not set up fast enough. And so we started doing time. Well, you had to be ready to count by this time. And we worked towards that goal little by little by little. They had more time. And then as they got, faster and faster, then we shortened the time. That way they could meet the goal in order to succeed.
Yeah, I think when you're anticipating that someone's not going to pass, I think time is one of the most important things, knowing that what that means for them. Each program is going to be different. Someone earlier said, really honest about what changing fieldwork means for their future, right? Graduation, finishing semesters on time, passing classes, all that jazz. And so I'll say it just candidly, like getting them out sooner than later for the sake of not wasting time. If it's inevitable, they're not going to pass, have that conversation ASAP instead of killing 3 or 4 extra weeks when that fieldwork coordinator could be searching for a new site, coming up with remediation plans, doing extra training, getting them back in the classroom, whatever it may be. It feels weird and kind of icky, but just be really efficient.
I'm going to add on to that as well. Chris put it really nicely in the chat too. Reach out to the clinical coordinators. We don't know what we don't know. So the best thing that you can do, because I've had this happen where a student was not going to pass the experience, it's getting interventions in place, whether it be with patient care issues or fundamental skills. So like she mentioned, like maybe there's something else that we can be doing collaboratively between the clinical fieldwork site, clinical site, and the didactic classroom. So let us know where we can help. The sooner the better, so we can get those interventions in place.
I'm going to just echo kind of what Karen said a little bit. I really appreciate whenever clinical instructors reach out to me as soon as they have struggles with students, because I will bring students into the lab with us, but I really like to foster the collaboration between the site, the student, and myself. And I have found that there's a lot of success within the student whenever those issues are known to me as soon as they happen. And it also reflects on their evaluation as well. So before an evaluation comes out, if we can try to get the student where they need to be to show the growth on their evaluation, I feel like it gives a student a lot of confidence as well.
I think it's important to always come at it from a proactive standpoint of maybe you're seeing these things early on, and maybe you never know, maybe they figure it out and they don't. but it's always better to know early on, and kind of communicate that with your CI, your clinical coordinator, those that are involved in the team, because yes, they might figure it out, but at the same time, it might take a lot more. And the earlier you can get those interventions, always the better.
Leah mentioned in the chat, document everything. This is something that will help everyone overall. The more documentation we can have, specifically, she said concrete examples, that couldn't be further from the truth. That's what we need. Having that peer take the student, get a second opinion, working with other people might bring out a different part of that personality and help us identify where we can give that student more supports. So thank you for that comment.
In a high acuity clinical setting, how do you intentionally foster engagement or a sense of belonging for students? And what impact do you believe this has on the learning outcomes and professional identity formations? Corey, I'll let you take this one first.
Yeah, this takes me back to a very specific moment during my clinicals, and I went to school out of state, so none of you will even know where it's at to be able to like relate to this. But they sat all of us students in this teeny tiny office so far away from the rest of the therapy team to do our documentation. We were so far removed from them, and it was a hospital setting, and it stunk. It stunk. We didn't feel like part of the team. We weren't getting to know anyone. We weren't building professional relationships. We weren't seeing how PTs and OTs and speech therapists and the other those allied health roles in that hospital setting were interacting on a daily basis. We were just 4 or 5 students stuck in an office, didn't know each other. And I've taken that into my practice with students and gone, okay, you're going to have lunch with us. You're going to be near us. You're going to sit next to us. Really unofficially saying, like, I'm going to make them my friend. I want them to feel like part of the group, except like no happy hours. We would always draw a really specific line at that part of it, right? I see a lot of laughs out there. So, but yeah. I think trying to make them feel like they are a therapist in that moment or a professional with you. That way they can talk to the other people around you and feel like part of the community. That's professional identity. That's feeling comfortable around healthcare providers and feeling comfortable around those people that, I mean, we all know at your work friends, you see more than any of your other real friends. They are your friends. So.
How about you, Bree?
I agree with Corey that, when students feel included and valued, they're more engaged and willing to ask questions and also better develop their professional identity, which ultimately improves learning outcomes. In cases, I would try to break the ice with the doctor and, maybe joke around with them or be like, oh, you're going to do this faster than you did the last one, just kind of break the ice to show them that, you can have fun and it's not all serious. And that way they can see another side of everybody in the room, that it's not just, okay, go, 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 go. Here we go. Surgery, stop. Okay, next one, get ready. Here we go. Add a little fun into it. And like Corey said, kind of make them feel like we're all a big family.
Yes, I think getting to know the students, like Karen said in the chat, is also really important. I like to involve them in decisions that I am making, just to make them feel like they're part of the team. Anybody else have anything that they like to, Karen?
I think that whole teamwork piece, the more they're included, let them sit in your workspace, let them see you talk with other people. That can help them build their confidence because you're modeling for them.
My last one is, how do you determine when to provide direct instruction versus when to allow a student to work through challenges independently? How does this balance support both learning and patient safety? Corey, you want to take this?
Yeah, I'm chewing on it because I think the easy answer is, safety first, period. That's some low hanging fruit that I think we all can agree that, like, hey, I will jump in, I will stop everything to that is number one. To determine when to provide direct instruction versus let the student work through challenges independently. I I think I go back to that comment I made earlier where I'm gonna give them the chance to work through it independently before I feel like I have to provide that direct instruction. If I see them start to fail, then I get in, I wear that therapist hat I was talking about earlier and start to give them that step by step. Once in a blue moon, I find myself having a really unique opportunity, probably one that's maybe too complicated, and saying, hey, come with me. You're going to experience this. I want you to be around me. You're probably not ready for it. And in that moment, if you can kind of see like, gosh, they're eager. It's 3 steps past where they're at. Is there value in me letting them do it with direct step by step? Hey, I'm going to emotionally go hand over hand on you to get this done. It could be appropriate. But I think you really have to gauge whether you're going to skip other steps. Are you going to skip reasoning and clinical judgment, decision-making that gets you there as a therapist or a provider of any sort by involving them in something really complex too early?
That's a good point. Bree, how about you?
I would say it depends kind of on patient safety, where the student's experience level is, and the potential risk for error. So depending on where you're at, what you're doing, and how comfortable the student is, makes a big difference. They can demonstrate competency and consistency. I'll intentionally step back and be there for support. The balance promotes clinical thinking, builds confidence, and maintains patient safety. For example, I don't put a lot of students back in CV and thoracic just because it's a lot to handle. I do like to get them back there at least so they can put eyes on what's happening and see how much is going on in the room. Because sometimes as a tech, when you're scrubbed in, I don't think you see maybe everything happening in the room. And it's nice to be able to kind of step back knowing that there's a different angle that you can see in every position in the operating room, for example.
I'm going to ask another question of the clinical coordinators or anyone on the panel. And I think some of this that we have addressed, but some of the biggest questions that I feel that maybe come to, to me at the dean level or working with the clinical coordinators or program directors is our students are often faced with the challenge of working with so many preceptors. And, some of our programs that's very natural for, some of them, they don't see that at all. They see 1 or 2. OT is a little different. But they often have struggles, I would say, if that's maybe the right word, of how they, interact and work with, different preceptors. So what kind of advice would you offer, to anyone on this call, or even we have things that we say to them, but I would also like to hear from others to support students in that capacity.
In surgical tech, you usually do have a lot of different preceptors. You kind of have to try to find the balance between cases that are good for them to see and certain people that they can or can't work with. So sometimes you have to kind of bend the knee for them to be able to be in the cases that they need to see, to be with somebody who's maybe not as friendly teaching. But I just kind of try to remind people that everybody does everything differently and to just be open and flexible. And be honest with them. If you don't know how to do something, don't just say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing or how to do this. Just say, hey, I'm not very comfortable doing this. Would you be able to help walk me through this? Or would you be able to help me with this part of this? And I think that helps them better communicate with people, whether they are better teachers or not, gives them kind of a footing for them to be off better during the day.
I think we're probably a little luckier. I think, Kendra, you started to say that OT gets to typically stay with lesser, right? I think what's always been helpful to make sure that every interaction is good is that, like, as site coordinator, I'm personally invested in everyone who wants to have a student or everyone who's going to be having a student with them. It's my job to make sure they're ready to give that student a good experience. And so I spend the time with them to onboard, to bring upon, reward when I can, right? And help them see the value in it, because we all know that some preceptors and instructors and coordinators, not everyone wants to host students. They do it because sometimes that's part of their performance review. You have to have 2 a year. They do it because that's just in the job description. So I think taking some time to really highlight the value or just buying them lunch twice a year or something like that, right?
I think also for some preceptors that may not be as comfortable with teaching or are more concerned with their portion of it than teaching, just reassuring them that they were once a student too, and maybe to be like, you don't want to be that teacher that you remember that you really didn't like, because sometimes that flips the switch and people are like, oh yeah, I don't want to be like so and so. You're right.
I think you both make really good points. I think everybody who's on this call is here for a reason because they enjoy having students. So I wish we didn't have preceptors or clinical staff that didn't enjoy having students. But again, reminding them that everyone was a student at one point. Even I talk with our students, telling them that they're not going to get along with everyone at their clinical site, just like in life. They're not going to get along with everyone out there. It's finding middle ground and how to work with them. Some of the best learning takeaways students have had is, one, they love the tech that they're with, the preceptor that they're with, and they learn what they want to become. Or those preceptors or techs that they don't like being with, they learn who they do not want to become. And those can be really powerful moving forward. And sometimes those end up making the best clinicians.
Amen.
Very true. Very true. One thing that we have actually done in surgical technology that has been really helpful is implementing recruiting people like Bree. At some of our bigger sites, we have liaisons, so someone to bridge the gap between all of the preceptors, so they have someone to go to if, let's say, they have a question, but they don't know the preceptor that well. So they have someone they feel comfortable with going to. And so that's been really helpful for us. Yeah,
I feel like
oh yeah, sorry, keep going.
I feel like I'm very lucky. A lot of my preceptors are alumni, or I've gotten to know a lot of the clinical staff that I work with. I know that Tara's on here and she's one of my clinical preceptors. And it's nice to be able to have those open conversations with staff so that we can identify things that are not going well for students and where we can help increase their confidence and kind of help them from there. Go ahead, Shani.
Nope, I just saw in the chat someone said I try to have them focus on things they want to do versus things they are learning not to do. And that, I like that. Anybody else have anything?
Yeah, I think, thank you so much for sharing those things. Those are very helpful and very important, I think, to us. And I think some of the things in our clinical coordinators also, and even fieldwork coordinators, put kind of what we share with them. But I do think, like you said, one of those messages that we also recognize, as well as you all hear, that your first, priority is patients, right? So we do remind our students too, like most of you, like even them, got into the profession to do the profession. And I think, Bree and Corey, you both hit on this. They don't always get into this because they want to be a teacher. So some of them are very natural. So we talk with our students about that. And I think it's very important. Yeah. How do you want to be? What are some great things that you learned from the preceptor that you're going to take with you when you become a preceptor? What stuck with you well? What didn't, and how might you change it? So we work a lot with students in having those conversations and things like that. So I appreciate the feedback. This was helpful.
I'd love to hear a takeaway from each of our panelists before we end for the evening. Caitlin, Corey, Bree, thank you guys all for participating and for sharing your wealth of wisdom with us. We're very grateful to have it, but I'd love to hear a takeaway from, all the way 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. What's one thing that you think everybody could try to take one step in the right direction tomorrow?
I would say as clinical instructors to just make sure that it's not only about teaching technical skills, you're teaching them how to be a person in their profession, not just the skills they need to succeed, but also how to succeed mentally as they grow into confident and safe healthcare professionals. Making sure you're creating supportive learning environments and communicating intentionally, encouraging reflection, making sure students build up the confidence they need to provide effective patient care in order for them to someday become the preceptor, because it's inevitable, you know. Everybody's got to teach everybody at some point.
Yeah, I think mine's like it's a sports reference, but they've been talking a lot lately about coaching trees. Now you have this coach that was around for years, and now all these dozens of coaches who worked for him over 20 years are having all this wild amount of success. And I think our version of that is this field work and clinical, and it's a little bit of a legacy lever for you. You want to have an impact on people, then you want them to go have impacts on people. And I think about the people who had impacts on me. It's this long game of network, and yeah, think about how you want to be thought about as history goes on in your profession.
Maybe I should have gone before you, Corey. That was pretty solid, and I don't know how to really follow that up with what I was going to say. I feel a little pressure here. My thought would just be in the spirit of, you know, learning and growth and development, as we encourage the students we work with to learn and dive in and stretch themselves. Like, it's okay to ask the same of ourselves, right? There's so many different models and ways to learn, even if it is about how do I build a relationship with Generation Z, like tips and tricks, you know, diving into AI if you're an AI person. The same standards of encouraging their growth and learning, like we should also be insatiable lifelong learners, and time is always going to be a barrier. So short snippets, learning from those that we are working with, or you know, the students that we are ultimately leading.
First of all, feel free to contact any of us if you have any additional questions. We'll be doing this again about this time next year.
That concludes the online education. I would like to thank all of our presenters for their experience, knowledge, and expertise. Be sure to subscribe so you're up to date with all of Nebraska Methodist College's continuing education offerings. Thank you.